Hey, it's Mark here, and welcome to the next edition of the Employee Survival Guide, where I tell you, as always, what your employer does definitely not want you to know about, and a lot more.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking these huge stacks of legal filings, court documents, all this dense material, and we're boiling it all down.
We're giving it a shortcut.
Exactly. The shortcut to understanding a story that is, frankly, jaw-dropping.
And today we are wading into a case that has, I think it's fair to say, it's redefined the cost of corporate toxicity, of retaliation. This isn't just a story about a few bad apples.
No.
This is a terrifying case study of what can happen when a massive company, we're talking Southern California Edison SCE and its parent, Edison International, when they seem to prioritize covering things up over doing the right thing.
And the final number, the figure that should be a blaring siren for every single executive out there, is a jury verdict that topped $464 million.
Yeah, let that sink in. A number that big isn't just about making someone whole. It's a statement. It's a jury screaming that the company's response wasn't just a mistake, it was malicious.
Yeah. Right. When a verdict gets into the hundreds of millions, you know you're looking at something way beyond simple negligence.
You're looking at malice, fraud, or oppression. Those are the legal terms, and the jury found them. So our sources today, they're the legal filings themselves. We have the complaint, which details the abuse.
We have the briefs, where the plaintiffs lay out their whole story with the evidence.
And crucially, we have the judge's rulings that let the case go to a jury in the first place, and the special verdict forms.
And that's the key, right? The verdict form tells us exactly what the jury was thinking, step by step.
It's the roadmap to that $464 million number.
So our mission is to unpack this whole chain of events. We need to look at the hostile environment that started it all, the specific acts of retaliation, this so-called sham investigation, and how all of it led to this just massive financial consequence.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The players. On one side, you have Southern California Edison and its parent company, Edison International. And on the other, you have the plaintiffs. First, Alfredo Martinez.
He's really the central figure, a long-term supervisor, highly rated, excellent reviews.
An unblemished record. This is not a problem employee. He's a manager who saw something horrible and decided he had to report it.
He's the whistleblower.
And then there's the second plaintiff, Justin Page. He was a technical planner. And his experience, it's the window into just how bad things really were. The daily abuse he suffered is what Martinez was trying to stop.
Okay, so let's start there. Part one. We have to understand the environment. The legal filings literally call the South Bay office a cesspool.
They do. And that word, cesspool, in a formal court document, that tells you something.
It's not a word you use lightly.
No. And when you dig into the depositions, you see why they chose it. This wasn't just, a crude workplace. The hostility was everywhere. It was sexual, it was racial, and it included alleged acts that are straight up criminal battery.
And it wasn't a secret.
Not at all. It was happening constantly, out in the open, often right in front of other people. It started with the supervisors and just cascaded down.
Let's get into the specifics of Justin Page's experience, because this is where it gets really disturbing. We're not just talking about offensive jokes.
Oh, we are way past jokes. Page alleged constant severe sexual harassment from supervisors. Guys named Jason Farr, David Kanowski, Robert Morgan.
What kind of harassment?
Well, according to the complaint, they were repeatedly asking him to expose himself. They called him a fag. They had these incredibly disturbing conversations about sexual violence.
I saw one detail that was just horrifying.
The one about his female colleague, Annabelle Olivares.
Yeah.
They allegedly pressured Page to physically restrain her because she had rejected their advances. They apparently told him it would teach that cunt to follow our rules.
That's not a human resources issue anymore. You're talking about a planned criminal assault.
You are, and that leads right into the physical part of it. The complaint details assault and battery. The physical contact was constant and humiliating.
Like what?
He stated he was aggressively smacked on his butt, that his anus was poked with a finger or, and this is just shocking, a golf iron during an employee event.
A golf iron?
Yes. And another supervisor, Kanowski, allegedly grabbed and aggressively flicked Page's penis through his clothes while other employees just stood there and laughed.
So this is where the legal distinction really matters, right? This isn't just harassment under, say, the Fair Employment and Housing Act.
Exactly. FILIA is the big one in California. It protects you from harassment and, critically for Martinez, retaliation. But when you add non-consensual physical contact, you're now talking about intentional torts like battery.
Which just piles on the liability.
Demonstrates how extreme the conduct was. And it wasn't just sexual. The toxicity was also deeply racial.
Right. The complaints mentioned a lot of slurs.
A ton of them. Page reported supervisors using the N-word for black employees, wetback for Hispanic employees. I mean, just awful stuff. But it went beyond slurs. They allegedly stated their goals out loud. Supervisors, including Kanowski, supposedly said they wanted to get rid of Mexicans and blacks in the office. He was also quoted as saying he didn't want to hire any black cunts.
So this was an explicit discriminatory agenda, not just casual racism.
It was a stated goal from leadership. And on top of all of this, you have the supervisors allegedly just looting the company, using corporate credit cards for personal gain.
The SCE American Express cards.
Yes. The documents allege they used company money for personal trips, tons of alcohol, maybe even for prostitutes. Kanowski allegedly bragged to Page about it.
He bragged about it.
Told him his vacations were basically free because he just expensed everything. He even encouraged Page to get in on it, telling him he was missing out.
That suggests a culture of total impunity. The rules just don't apply to them.
Which brings us to the systemic failure. This couldn't happen in a vacuum. Higher management had to be complicit.
And that points to the district manager, Paul Hennessy.
Hennessy is central here. Witnesses said he was right there, in the lobby, when these sexual jokes were happening. And he never said a word, never told anyone to stop.
And worse, he allegedly shut down complaints.
That's the most damning part. A female employee, Sherelle Biggers, complained to him about sexual harassment. And his response, allegedly, was to dismiss it by saying she wasn't a very good employee.
Wow. So the message is clear. If you complain, we attack you. We attack your credibility.
Precisely. It actively discourages reporting, which is the exact opposite of what the law requires. And even later, after the company finally did an internal investigation...
The one that confirmed all this was happening.
Yes, even then the discipline was selective. They fired the three main guys, Kanowski, Farr, and Morgan.
But the complaint lists a lot of other people, right? Christine Warren, Tamar Sigmund.
A whole list of them. People who are simulating oral sex with a banana at work, openly discussing graphic sexual acts.
And what happened to them?
Nothing. Or maybe a verbal warning. SCE's own investigation confirmed their misconduct, but they stayed. And this failure, leaving all the cronies in place, is what set the stage for the retaliation. It showed the company was just doing damage control, not actually cleaning house. So that's the environment. And if that was part one, then part two is the spark that lights the fuse. It's when Alfredo Martinez decides he has to do something.
And the company's reaction is just immediate and vicious.
It's critical to remember who Martinez was. He was an outstanding manager, long-term employee, great record, on track for a promotion. He wasn't some disgruntled worker.
He was a leader.
Right. And starting in late 2016, he begins formally reporting all this. He consolidates complaints from Olivares, from Biggers, from others, and takes them to labor relations and his boss, Paul Hennessy.
He engages in legally protected activity. And Hennessy's response?
Instant retaliation. Witnesses said Hennessy was mad and upset. He immediately starts micromanaging Martinez, interrogating him over little things, trying to build a paper trail.
That's classic, subtle retaliation.
It is. But the subtlety did not last long. It quickly escalated into an open conspiracy.
This is where it gets really scary.
Yeah. Multiple witnesses heard the supervisors who were under investigation and their cronies openly plotting revenge. Page overheard them talking about a plan to lie to get Martinez out.
And it was worse than that.
Much worse. They talked about killing him. A direct quote was a plan to kill Martinez if they got fired. These were explicit death threats.
And then the threats became real. The story about the nails in his tires is just chilling.
It's terrifying. You report misconduct at work, and then you walk out to your car and find nails in all four tires. In the context of known death threats, the workplace is no longer just hostile. It's a crime scene.
The company had to know the level of danger at this point.
They had to. And yet their focus wasn't on protecting Martinez. It was on investigating him.
Which brings us to the coordinated complaint campaign. The timing here is everything.
It's the smoking gun. The main harassment investigation starts on February 16th, 2017, and then, in the next 45 days, boom, 7 separate, mostly anonymous complaints get filed against Martinez.
7 in 45 days. That's not a coincidence.
It's statistically impossible, and the plaintiff's lawyers laid this out perfectly. The flood of complaints was clearly orchestrated, especially since SCE's own investigators later found that 5 of the 7 had no merit.
They were baseless.
Completely baseless. But here's the kicker. Instead of SCE seeing this and saying, wait a minute, this looks like a coordinated retaliatory attack,
He did the opposite.
they treated the complaints as legitimate. They used this flood of baseless accusations as the reason to launch a formal disciplinary investigation into Martinez.
That's just willful blindness.
It's the core of the retaliation claim. They had warnings of a conspiracy, and then they watched it play out in real time, and they chose to validate the conspiracy rather than protect the whistleblower.
Okay, so this brings us to part 3, and this is where we really need to do a deep dive, because this is the excuse SCE used to get rid of Martinez. The whole situation with an employee named Anthony Escamilla.
This is a perfect example of how you can weaponize a totally normal, even helpful workplace situation. So Escamilla was a general foreman. He gets injured outside of work back in August 2016.
And Martinez's team was already short-staffed, right?
Massively. Some guys were working 120-hour weeks. It was unsustainable. So Martinez needed Escamilla's brain, his planning expertise, even if he couldn't physically be on site.
So what did he do?
He did what a manager does. He went to his boss, Hennessy, and got verbal approval to let Escamilla work from home while he recovered. Most of a general foreman's job is administrative anyway, planning, paperwork. It was a perfectly reasonable accommodation.
And the key fact here is that this went on for 7 months.
7 months. Everybody knew. Hennessy knew, other managers knew, the crew knew. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a problem.
Until it suddenly was.
Exactly. It suddenly became a problem in March 2017, right after Martinez blew the whistle. An anonymous complaint comes in about Escamilla working from home, and the plaintiffs argued it was initiated by Jason Farr, one of the supervisors under investigation.
So the retaliators found their weapon.
They found their pretext. And the investigation that followed, led by an ethics investigator named Vaughn Livas, is what the court allowed the jury to see as a potential sham.
Okay, let's break that down. Why was the investigation seen as a sham? What were the main arguments?
There are really 3 big ones. The first is that the investigation completely ignored the context of retaliation.
Yeah, just looked at the Escamilla thing in a vacuum.
Exactly. Livas, the investigator, was told about the threats, he knew about the plot to get Martinez fired, and yet he admitted he did nothing to investigate that. He ignored the suspiciously timed flood of complaints. A real investigation would have started by asking, is this complaint part of the revenge plot we were warned about?
But he didn't.
He didn't. He just treated it as a legitimate policy violation issue.
Okay, so that's plank 1. What's the second?
The second is that the investigation ignored the key exculpatory fact, Hennessy's approval.
The verbal okay he gave Martinez.
Yes. Martinez's boss approved the arrangement. That should have been a central finding. But the investigation basically ignored it. It also ignored that everyone knew about this for 7 months. Why now? The investigation's narrow focus conveniently excluded any evidence that would have cleared Martinez.
And the third plank.
The alleged coercive tactics used against Escamilla, the injured employee.
What did they do to him?
Witnesses said Livas was aggressive, that he threatened Escamilla with termination for working from home and supposedly falsifying documents. The argument is that they were trying to bully a vulnerable, injured employee into giving them the answers they wanted to hear to build their case against Martinez.
So Livas finishes this investigation and concludes Martinez violated, 5 company policies?
Something like that. Professional conduct, Joe protected leave, code of conduct. A bunch of them. The main one was that Martinez didn't formally direct Escamilla to go through Sedgwick.
Sedgwick is the third-party company that handles all the formal leave paperwork, like FMLA.
Correct. The company's argument was, this is a bright line rule. Martinez is a supervisor. He broke the rule. End of story.
But was it really that simple? Was that the real reason he was fired?
Well, that's where the pretext argument comes in. Martinez's team showed overwhelming evidence that this was common practice. They showed that Hennessy himself, when he was a supervisor, had made similar accommodations without going through Sedgwick.
So the boss who approved it had done the same thing himself?
Yes. And SCE's own corporate representative had to admit in a deposition that, yeah, sometimes supervisors made accommodations without involving Sedgwick.
So the argument becomes, if this is a fireable offense, why was Martinez the only person ever fired for it?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. Why wasn't Hennessy fired? Why wasn't anyone else ever disciplined for it? It showed that the rule was just a convenient hook they used to hang the retaliation on.
So this is where that legal concept, the cat's paw theory, comes into play, right?
Absolutely. This is a perfect cat's paw case. The idea is that a biased employee, in this case, the retaliating supervisors, influences a supposedly neutral decision maker to take action.
So the bad guys use the HR investigation as their tool, their cat's paw, to get what they want.
Precisely. Farr and Kanowski, wanting revenge, file the fake complaint. Leivas conducts a flawed investigation that ignores all the red flags. Then, the high-level executives who make the final decision to fire Martinez, they rely entirely on that flawed, contaminated report. The jury had to decide if those executives did their own independent, good-faith review.
And given the verdict, the jury clearly said no.
They said the malicious intent from the bottom got imputed all the way to the top.
Which all culminated in Martinez being backed into a corner.
Yep. On April 27, 2017, they give him the choice, resign right now or you're fired. And legally, that's what's known as a constructive termination.
Explain that. Because he technically resigned.
He did, but the court saw right through it. They used this amazing phrase, saying he was caught between the Scylla of voluntary resignation and the Charybdis of forced termination.
So between a rock and a hard place.
Basically, yeah. The decision to fire him was already made. He knew it. By resigning, he could at least protect his work record and get unemployment. Because the choice was coerced, the law treats it as if he was fired. So, Martinez is gone. But for Justin Page, the ordeal was far from over.
Right, because the company fired the three main supervisors, Farr, Kanowski, and Morgan. You'd think that would help.
It should have. But the retaliation against Page just shifted. They transferred him to a different office in Fullerton, supposedly for a fresh start, but it just put a target on his back.
He was labeled a rat.
A troublemaker. He started getting threatening phone calls from the cronies of the fired supervisors who were all still working for SCE.
And the company's solution was to send an email.
An email asking people not to call Page, which of course just highlighted who he was and made things worse.
It's like they had no idea how to actually handle the situation.
It was a total failure to protect him. The remaining cronies were poisoning the well, telling people in other offices that Page was a rat. The stress was so severe he ended up having to go out on medical leave.
Just debilitating anxiety.
Completely. And Martinez, even after he was gone, he faced post-resignation retaliation.
How so?
SCE allegedly blacklisted him. They prohibited him from working on any of their property, which is devastating for someone in his line of work. They estimated it cost him hundreds of thousands a year.
And they tried to get him fired from his new job.
Allegedly, yes. They called his new employer to try and sabotage him. The retaliation was relentless.
So obviously the company tried to get this whole case thrown out before trial.
Yeah.
But the judge refused.
Yes. The judge's denial of their summary judgment motion was the turning point. The court found that Martinez had presented a convincing mosaic of circumstantial evidence that the firing was pretextual.
What does that mean, a convincing mosaic?
It means you take all the pieces together. His perfect record before the complaint.
The immediate micromanaging.
The death threats, the nails in the tires, the flood of baseless complaints, the flawed investigation. Individually, maybe you could explain one or two away. But all together,
It's a picture.
an overwhelming picture of retaliation. And because the retaliation claim was strong, the claim for failure to prevent retaliation was also strong. And so was the claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Which is a really high bar to clear. The conduct has to be outrageous.
And the court found it was. The physical assaults, the death threats, trying to coerce Page into participating in a sexual assault. The court said that easily met the standard of being beyond the bounds of civilized decency.
And finally, let's talk about the corporate net. How did the parent company, Edison International, get pulled into this?
That was a huge legal win for the plaintiffs. They had to prove that the parent company was also an employer. They argued that SCE and Edison International were an integrated enterprise.
Meaning they weren't really separate companies in terms of employment.
Exactly. They share HR policies, they share management, there's centralized control. The jury ultimately agreed that they were so intertwined that they operated as a single employer. And that meant the parent company's deep pockets were on the hook for the verdict.
And that brings us to the verdict itself, June 2022. The numbers are just. They're worth repeating.
The final total verdict against both companies was $464,577,265. It's a staggering amount of money for an employment case.
So let's break it down. For Alfredo Martinez, he got over $22 million in compensatory damages. That's for lost wages and for his pain and suffering.
Right. $16 million of that was just for pain and suffering, which tells you how much the jury felt for what he went through.
And for Justin Page, he received about $2.2 million in compensatory damages.
For his lost wages and his own pain and suffering. But those numbers, as big as they are dwarfed by the punitive damages.
This is the punishment part.
This is the punishment. The jury awarded Martinez an additional $400 million in punitive damages.
$400 million.
And another $40 million for Page. So over $440 million was purely to punish the company and send a message.
We can see exactly what the jury was thinking by looking at the special verdict form, the actual questions they answered.
It's a perfect roadmap. They found Martinez engaged in protected activity. Check. They found he suffered an adverse action. Check. They found his whistleblowing was a substantial motivating reason. Check.
But the real kill shot for the company's defense was question 5.
Oh, absolutely. The company argued to the very end that they fired him for legitimate reasons. They said he broke the rules.
And question 5 asked the jury, did Southern California Edison Company prove that Alfredo Martinez violated the company's code of conduct? And so on.
And the jury's answer in big, bold letters was NO.
They just flat out rejected the entire premise of the company's defense.
Completely. The jury saw right through the pretext. They said, no, we don't believe your story about the Escamilla situation. This was revenge. And that finding, that rejection, is what opened the door for the massive punitive award.
Because to get punitive damages, you have to find malice, fraud, or oppression.
By a managing agent, yes. And the jury found it. They checked that box. They said the company's actions weren't just incompetent. They were done with a conscious disregard for the rights and safety of their employees. It was actively malicious.
And because they had looped in the parent company as an integrated enterprise,
they could make sure the punishment was big enough to actually hurt. And believe me, a $464 million verdict hurts.
So if we pull all of this together, the key takeaway from this whole deep dive is just, it's incredibly stark. If you're an employer in California and you fail to stop harassment and then you try to cover it up and go after the whistleblower,
you are risking catastrophic liability. The initial harassment was a huge failure, but the $500 million mistake was the retaliation. It was the decision to believe the retaliator's narrative and destroy the whistleblower instead of fixing the problem.
They punished the cover-up more than the original crime.
Absolutely. The jury punished the malicious process, and we have to keep coming back to that cat's paw idea. The jury understood that the supervisors weaponized neutral company policies. They used the HR rulebook as a weapon to get their revenge.
And the company let them. The corporate structure failed to stop it.
It failed completely, and that's the ultimate lesson here for any high-level manager. Are you sure your internal investigations are truly objective, or are you just rubber-stamping a conclusion that's been fed to you by people with a motive to lie?
That is the $500 million question.
It is, and that's the final thought we want to leave you with. This case proves that just having an internal investigation isn't enough. It's not a legal shield if that investigation itself is poisoned by retaliatory intent. So we encourage you to look more into this, into the cat's paw doctrine. How do you design a system that can actually break that chain of malice? Because this case is one of the most stunning and expensive examples of what happens when that chain remains unbroken.
An incredible case and a powerful lesson. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.
If you like the Employee Survival Guide, I'd really encourage you to leave a review. We try really hard to produce information to you that's informative, that's timely, that you can actually use and solve problems on your own and at your employment. So if you like to leave a review anywhere you listen to our podcast, please do so. And leave 5 stars, because anything less than 5 is really not as good, right? I'll keep it up. I'll keep the standards up. I'll keep the information flowing at you. If you'd like to send me an email and ask me a question, I'll actually review it and post it on there. You can send it to mcarui@capclaw.com. That's capclaw.com.